Ukraine and Russia. Two nations intertwined by history, language, and culture. Yet, their relationship has long been fraught with tension, a complex tapestry woven from centuries of conquest, control, and resistance. To understand the current crisis, one must delve into this troubled past. For centuries, Ukraine, a vast land bridge between Russia and Europe, has found itself caught in a geopolitical tug-of-war. Ruled by various empires from the Mongols to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Ukrainian identity was forged in the crucible of these external pressures. The rise of the Russian Empire in the 18th century brought Ukraine under increasingly firm control. Policies of Russification, aimed at suppressing Ukrainian language and culture, sparked resentment and fueled a burgeoning sense of national consciousness. The collapse of the Russian Empire in the aftermath of World War I offered a fleeting glimpse of independence for Ukraine. This dream, however, was short-lived, crushed under the weight of a resurgent Russia, eager to reassert its dominance. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the embers of historical grievance continue to smolder in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region. Here, a predominantly Russian-speaking population has long felt a closer affinity to Moscow than to Kiev. In 2014, following the Euromaidan revolution that ousted Ukraine's pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych, unrest erupted in the Donbass. Fueled by Russian propaganda and backed by covert military support, separatists declared independence, plunging the region into a bloody conflict. For 8 long years, the Ukrainian army has been locked in a grinding war of attrition with Russian-backed separatists. Thousands have perished in the fighting, and millions have been displaced from their homes. The Minsk agreements, a series of ceasefires brokered by France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine, have failed to bring a lasting peace. Sporadic outbreaks of violence have become the norm, a stark reminder of the region's volatility. If the Donbass was a slow burn, then the annexation of Crimea in 2014 was an explosion that shattered the fragile peace in Eastern Europe. This strategic peninsula, jutting into the Black Sea, became a focal point of Russian aggression. Home to Russia's Black Sea Fleet, and with a majority Russian-speaking population, Crimea was ripe for exploitation. Under the pretext of protecting ethnic Russians from a supposed fascist coup in Kyiv, Russian troops, operating without insignia, seized control of the peninsula. A hastily organized referendum, condemned as illegitimate by the international community, paved the way for Crimea's annexation into the Russian Federation. This brazen act of aggression sent shockwaves through Europe and beyond, marking a turning point in relations between Russia and the West. The annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass cast a long shadow over Ukraine, but what the world witnessed in 2022 was a horrifying escalation of the conflict. The full-scale invasion launched by Russia in February of that year marked a turning point in European history. Vladimir Putin, the architect of Russia's revanchist foreign policy, had long sought to reassert his country's dominance over its former Soviet neighbors. Ukraine, with its Western aspirations and strategic location, became the primary target of his imperial ambitions. Despite warnings from Western intelligence agencies, the sheer scale and brutality of the Russian invasion caught many off guard. Cities were bombarded, civilians were targeted, and millions were forced to flee their homes in what became Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II. The world watched in horror as the images of devastation poured out of Ukraine. The conflict, once confined to the country's eastern fringes, had now engulfed the entire nation, leaving a trail of death and destruction in its wake. Section 5, A Dangerous Game, Escalation, and the Specter of Nuclear War. As the conflict in Ukraine grinds on, a chilling new dimension has emerged, the specter of nuclear war. Putin's thinly veiled threats to unleash Russia's nuclear arsenal have raised the stakes to an almost unimaginable level. This dangerous game of brinkmanship is being played out against a backdrop of escalating military support for Ukraine from the West. The United States and its NATO allies, while ruling out direct military intervention, have provided Ukraine with billions of dollars worth of weapons, intelligence, and training. These weapons shipments, while crucial to bolstering Ukraine's defenses, have also drawn Russia's ire. Moscow has accused the West of fighting a proxy war against Russia, and has threatened to target supply lines delivering weapons to Ukraine. The situation is further complicated by Putin's recent updates to Russia's nuclear doctrine. These changes redefine an attack from a non-nuclear state, backed by a nuclear power, as a joint assault on Russia, potentially justifying a nuclear response to further U.S. involvement. Section 6. Biden's gambit arming Ukraine, risking confrontation. The Biden administration has walked a tightrope in its support for Ukraine, seeking to provide Kyiv with the means to defend itself without provoking a wider conflict with Russia. This delicate balancing act has drawn criticism from both sides of the political spectrum. On the one hand, hawks argue that the U.S. should be doing more to arm Ukraine, including providing long-range missiles and fighter jets that could strike deep inside Russian territory. They contend that a more robust response is necessary to deter further Russian aggression. On the other hand, doves caution against escalating the conflict and risking a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. They argue that a negotiated settlement, however imperfect, is the only way to prevent a catastrophic war between nuclear-armed powers. Biden's decision in late 2024 to lift restrictions on Ukraine's use of ATACMS, long-range missiles capable of striking targets inside Russia, marked a significant escalation of U.S. involvement. This move, while welcomed by Kyiv, drew a swift and furious response from Moscow. Section 7. A World on Edge International Response and the Role of NATO. The war in Ukraine has sent shockwaves through the international system, testing alliances and raising profound questions about the future of global security. The response from the West has been largely unified, with countries imposing unprecedented sanctions on Russia and providing billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine. NATO, the Western military alliance formed in the aftermath of World War II, has played a key role in deterring further Russian aggression. The alliance has bolstered its military presence in Eastern Europe, deploying thousands of troops to member states bordering Russia and conducting large-scale military exercises. However, the conflict has also exposed divisions within the international community. China, while officially neutral, has provided diplomatic and economic support to Russia. Other countries, particularly in the global south, have been reluctant to condemn Russia's invasion, citing historical grievances against the West or concerns about the economic fallout from sanctions. The war in Ukraine has underscored the importance of international cooperation in addressing global challenges. It has also highlighted the limitations of existing security structures in a world increasingly defined by great power competition. Section 8. The Trump card uncertainty looms with a new administration. Adding another layer of complexity to the already volatile situation is the upcoming transition of power in the United States. The election of Donald Trump, who has repeatedly expressed admiration for Vladimir Putin and criticized U.S. support for Ukraine, has injected a great deal of uncertainty into the equation. During his presidency, Trump pursued a policy of rapprochement with Russia, often at the expense of U.S. allies and interests. He questioned the value of NATO, withdrew the U.S. from key arms control treaties, and refused to condemn Russian interference in U.S. elections. While Trump's exact plans for Ukraine remain unclear, his past statements and actions suggest that he may seek to reverse course on U.S. support for Kiev. He has hinted at a willingness to recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea and has called for an end to U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Such a policy shift would have profound implications for the conflict, potentially emboldening Putin and weakening Ukraine's ability to defend itself. It would also deal a severe blow to U.S. credibility on the world stage, signaling to allies and adversaries alike that American commitments are unreliable. Section 9. A Fragile Future. The Stakes for Ukraine and the World. As the war in Ukraine enters its third year, the situation remains perilous. The conflict has already claimed tens of thousands of lives, displaced millions, and devastated Ukraine's economy. And with no end in sight to the fighting, the human toll is only likely to mount in the months and years to come. The stakes in this conflict extend far beyond Ukraine's borders. At its core, this is a battle over the future of Europe, the rules-based international order, and the very principles of democracy and self-determination. If Putin is allowed to succeed in Ukraine, it will embolden other autocrats around the world, who will see that aggression and the use of force are rewarded. It will also undermine the international system that has kept the peace in Europe for decades, raising the specter of a more unstable and dangerous world. The coming months will be critical. The choices made by leaders in Kyiv, Moscow, Washington, and other world capitals will determine whether this conflict escalates into a wider war, or whether a path to peace can be found. The future of Ukraine, and indeed the world, hangs in the balance.